And I want to just show you a couple things from Hizballah. If we look at number 5 here, Hizballah released this video this week of their Iranian-made Coronet anti-tank guided missile hitting Israeli signals tower here. And this is part of this war. And on Saturday night, we saw the way that these systems integrate for Israel and are critical to Israel's defense. And so we've seen a lot of these towers get hit throughout the war. And this is Hizballah preparing the landscape for these wars. A lot of times you hear this is just a tower. But as Nasrallah pointed out, these are not just towers. This is the network connectivity that Israel uses for its military. These targets are degrading Israel's capacity to carry out and to escalate the war with Hizballah. So we've seen that since October the 8th. There's been more than 1,300 Hizballah attacks since October the 8th. They carry out about 15 a day, between 8 and 15 a day, every single day across the whole border in Lebanon. Let's look at number 6 tomorrow, because this is this was yesterday. This is footage from South footage from South Lebanon of a I left the audio in for that one too. So that's you can see that's an Ababil drone that Hizballah is firing, and Hizballah fired this. They said at an Israeli Iron Dome air defense platform yesterday, which is the third one that they have targeted, and we know that the Israelis have at least 10 of these, and then the Americans gave them at least 2 more. But if we look at the next footage, there 13C here tomorrow, we can see that Hizballah released this video yesterday of the Iron Dome platform. That first shot just gave you the statistics for the Iron Dome, which is that it's a $50 million air defense platform. Each interceptor that we saw in that footage firing is a $50,000 interceptor, and the launcher carries 20 interceptors. This is footage from Saturday night that Hizballah released yesterday, and we weren't sure what Hizballah's role in the operation was, which is, again, if it wasn't a demonstrative operation by Iran, Hizballah could have carried out a significant attack from Lebanon, which would have tied up a considerable part of Israel's air defenses. So we're seeing here on the screen, you can see the launches from the Iron Dome on Saturday night, and Hizballah is tracking the launch. They have got this Iron Dome unit under surveillance. You can see it launching interceptors, and then we see in this footage, it's dark footage, but you can see it being struck there twice. And then if you keep looking at that circle, you'll see the system apparently exploding. So Hizballah is able to hit these Iron Dome systems and knock them out, which is also a development that we haven't seen before on this level, knocking out this system. You can see here the rockets, outgoing rockets, in the missile interceptors being fired. And this is something that the Israelis are trying to get more of from the Americans, is more of these interceptors. And the drone footage that we just saw before this from Hizballah, there was no air raid siren on that drone. The drone flies low to the ground. It's fiberglass. It doesn't have a heat signature. And so it evades this radar. And is able to hit these Iron Dome platforms. The Israelis admitted from that drone we saw in the previous shot 3 casualties at the Iron Dome platform, because these platforms are manned platforms. They involve a radar station, a command and control vehicle, and then the warheads themselves. And so Hizballah is able to target these Iron Domes on Saturday night, which is something we didn't know. We didn't have confirmation of until late last night when Hizballah released this video. So many elements to this operation, Iranian operation, that we don't know about yet and will maybe learn in the future. But what we do know so far about it is a remarkable development, an unprecedented development, and something that's put Israel in a bit of a strategic bind about how to respond when the capabilities of Iran are on display in the way that they were. And as we talked about on the Sunday show. So if people didn't see our live stream with Mohammed Marandi, I really suggest you check that out, because we went in depth with him on this Iranian missile attack. So that is the resistance report from the south to the north of the Gaza Strip, from the West Bank, from Hizballah in Lebanon, and from Iran. So it was a busy week. A lot of information, a lot of videos to try to sort through, because there was a lot, both sides put out videos that weren't actually there was a lot of, there, as there always is, they always sneak in some Russian footage. The Israelis snuck in some Russian footage and said that it was Iranian footage. So yeah, it was a lot, Ali. You're right. To link back to it's been quite a week. A lot going on.
A lot. Thank you so much, Jon. Yeah.
And thank you for breaking it down, because even for someone like me who follows this stuff closely, it's really a lot. And as you say, there's misinformation coming from all directions. Mm-hmm. Mostly, in my opinion, from the direction of Israel and its backers. And I think Iran was pretty transparent about what it was doing, and pretty transparent that it was not seeking an escalation. It was seeking to make a point, which is to deter Israel. And I think that's a really key point here, that the Israelis are on notice that Iran has the ability to strike anywhere in Israel.
Yeah.
And pretty much it can't be stopped. Now the question, though, is, just in the last few minutes as we've been live, Netanyahu has come out and he said that basically, because there's been a parade of foreign ministers, the German, the British, David Cameron and Annalena Baerbock, and presumably the Americans have been on the phone. And their approach with Israel is, oh, look what a good job you did on Saturday. You shot down all those missiles. You really showed how smart and capable you are. Now you don't need to do anything. There's no need to retaliate, because, of course, all of these powers that helped Israel to try to fend off the Iranian attack, and failed because the missiles made it to their targets, don't want a full-scale war. But what Netanyahu has said in the last few minutes or the last hour or so is, thank you for your advice. We'll make our own decisions. So the Iranians seem to be, the Israelis seem to be intent on doing something. What it is unclear. It's also not clear what capability they have, because the Israeli Air Force doesn't really have the range by itself to make it all the way to Iran. I was looking back at the 1981 Israeli airstrike on the nuclear reactor in Iraq, which was almost as far as Iran. It was short of the Iranian border, but it was almost as far as Iran. And that raid really took the Israeli Air Force to its limit. They don't have an aerial refueling capacity of their own, so they would have to rely on allies who are willing to help them to carry out a counterstrike on Iran. And it's not clear that their allies are willing to do that. In the 1981 raid, from what I read, they had to add additional fuel tanks to their fighter jets, which they then dropped, and they sort of barely made it to Iraq and back. I think they do also have ballistic missiles as well, but we've never seen Israel use ballistic missiles, if I'm correct. They've never used them in any kind of military action. So there are technical aspects there, but also political and geopolitical aspects, because the Iranians have made it very clear that we will respond. There have even been Iranian officials saying the missiles will be flying immediately. This time there's not going to be any kind of warning. Now, the political aspect of this is also very interesting, because it reminds me of the 1991 Gulf War. And people who are old enough will remember that at that time you had the international coalition, so-called coalition, led by the United States, to go and expel Iraqi troops from Kuwait, which Saddam Hussein had invaded. Now, this was politically a very fragile coalition, let's say, or it was a coalition that depended on Israel not doing anything, Israel keeping a low profile. For example, Syria was in this coalition. Syria was in the coalition, if I'm correct, the Saudis and others. So during that war, Iraq fired Scud missiles at Israel. And this was the first time. So the scenes that we saw in the last few days were, in a sense, not unprecedented. They're unprecedented in many people's lifetimes. But I remember, and I was listening on a shortwave radio at the time, that's how long ago this was, the Scud missiles, which flew from Iraq and hit Tel Aviv and hit targets in Israel. And that was a major, major, major thing at the time. And the Israelis wanted to retaliate, but the Americans told them, don't. You may not, because politically, this would break apart our coalition. The unity of the coalition depended on Israel staying out. And I think I remember at the time that the Americans even went so far as to deny to the Israelis whatever electronic transponder codes they would need to tell friendly from hostile aircraft. In other words, if the Israelis wanted to fly a raid into Iraq, there would be the risk that they would shoot down American airplanes if they didn't have these transponder codes, which the George W. Bush administration didn't want to give them. So the Americans forced the Israelis not to respond to the Scud missiles in 1991. And it strikes me that there's a very similar dynamic playing out here, where the US interest is not to allow Israel to respond, at least to temper it as much as possible. The difference being that this administration is, every US administration is extremely pro-Israeli, but this one seems to be taking it to an extreme, and it's unclear if they're willing to put their foot down. The last thing I want to say, and I think you alluded to this, John, is the idea to me of the Saudi Air Force flying refueling flights for airplanes that are defending the Zionist genocide regime as it murders children in Gaza, the idea of the Jordanian Air Force defending the Zionist genocide regime. There was a report in Yedi'at Ahronot citing Israeli military sources saying that Israeli aircraft were allowed to fly in Jordanian skies in order to try to intercept missiles. Well, none of these air forces, none of these countries have lifted a finger to stop the genocide in Gaza. I think, like most people, particularly people in the region, I am, I just can't get my head around it. I can't get my head around it.
That's shameful.
Yeah, Jordan really put themselves out there. Their position is very, very stark on this, dropping, intercepting, and sending flaming wreckage all throughout Jordan, in order to defend missiles that people in their own country were cheering for, people who are closer to the target cheering for. So the people on the street didn't believe that they were the target of these strikes. So that coalition was remarkable. And I think that the Americans putting that coalition together is part of the give and take with the Israelis, saying you can't respond. We will step up and do this defense of you, but that's it. You can't carry out another strike after that, because the principal reason is the Americans are very vulnerable in the Middle East. They have troops and bases all over the Middle East that are well within, much closer than firing these ballistic missiles at Israel. And so there's actual vulnerability for American forces that has them stepping in, I believe, and saying to the Israelis that this, in a way that the Israelis ignore them about Gaza. I'm not sure that it's the same in this circumstance because of the presence of American troops, the vulnerability of American troops, and also Iran, like you said, that Iran said they will respond immediately. This attack was 2 weeks in the planning. The Iranians all but gave them the window of the attack. Israel had full preparation for the attack ahead of time. And there was only, like I said, it was a 16-minute operation. There was no second wave. There was no third wave. There was no saturation of the air defense system by the ballistic missiles. They could have fired many times more drones than that. Iran has a major drone program that has, despite sanctions, been able to operate. And so Iran was just sending a message without doing any, very carefully. They very carefully targeted these bases and didn't target civilian areas, didn't do something that would lead to an escalation, but just demonstrated that they could do this and will do this. And so when I was saying unprecedented, I was saying from Iran. It's the first time from Iran, from direct territory. And it's the first time that there's been a missile war on this scale. That was the first sign, the first that we've seen of that. And so I think that Iran made its point. The Americans were saying that they didn't know about the assassination of the Quds Force generals. They were saying that the Israelis told them 5 minutes before, and the Americans tried to say they were upset about that. It's not clear how much back channeling they did to the Iranians, but the Americans are fine with telling the Washington Post that they told the Iranians that we weren't part of this. Don't hit us. Don't be mad at us. Don't target our tens of thousands of troops and billions of dollars of assets in the region. So yeah, the escalation ladder, it's not clear what the Israelis can do. They lack strategic bombers. They need the Americans for an attack on Iran. And it doesn't appear that the Americans are interested in that kind of World War III escalation. So it's remarkable that the Iranians have the precision to thread the needle on not escalating to World War III. And I think, I think history will reflect that both sides will say that they came out the winners of that. I think Biden's quote was "Take the W" to Netanyahu. You defended the attack. We'll rebuild the missile interceptors, and the Iranians, I think, clearly demonstrated their capabilities for the first time. We saw the Iranians hit the American base after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. But this is the first real long-distance test of Iran's Iran's missile system in battle.
Yeah.
It seems to me like the Israelis may strike. I don't know. I mean, that's the feeling I have. Like, as a really strike.
Yeah.
I mean, the quote you just said, John, from Biden about, or that was communicated about, telling the Israelis to take the W. As we know from our own experience, even with just Israel lobbyists, Israel always refuses to take yes for an answer. So who knows? Who knows? But that's the feeling I have at the moment anyway. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.